They didn't whisper, they didn't pull me aside. They stood on stage, during our neighborhood's annual Brookstone block party, the one I had spent weeks organizing, funding, decorating for, and would later clean up after. And they said, loudly and clearly into the microphone, "She's just our stepmom. We only listen to our real mom." The words hung in the warm Georgia evening air like smoke. The entire town square seemed to freeze. I could feel every pair of eyes shifting toward me, some with shock, others with that peculiar mix of pity and morbid fascination people reserve for public humiliations. Cameron still held the microphone, 16 years old, and suddenly looking both defiant and uncertain about what he'd just unleashed. Madison stood beside him, 14 going on 30, arms crossed over her chest like she was guarding something precious, perhaps the fantasy that her parents might someday reunite. My own children, Sophie, 10, and Lucas, 8, pressed closer to me, confused and hurt. I felt Lucas's small hand slip into mine, squeezing with a question his voice couldn't form. Even Greg, my husband of 2 years, looked frozen, his mouth slightly open, clearly unprepared for his children's public declaration. I wish I could say I broke down or stormed off or created some dramatic scene worthy of the moment, but that's not what happened. Instead, I smiled. I nodded slightly, and I walked off that stage with as much dignity as I could muster, pulling out my phone as I descended the steps. "Mayor Jackson?" I said calmly when he answered, spotting him across the aisle, square in his blue blazer and American flag pin. "Could you be a witness to something for me?" He agreed, puzzled but curious. What happened next would become Brookstone legend. By midnight, the locks had been changed, the Wi-Fi disconnected, all streaming services logged out, and Greg had received a simple text message. "Since I'm just the stepmom, I'm stepping back. Their biological parent can handle everything now. Good luck." I never wanted to be the villain in their story. When I met Greg Phillips at a teacher conference 3 years ago, me representing Sophie's class, him there for Madison, I wasn't looking for love. My ex-husband had walked out when Lucas was barely 4, leaving behind nothing but empty promises and a trail of unpaid bills. Greg was different. Kind eyes, steady job, as a construction project manager. A man who showed up for his kids despite the bitter divorce that had torn apart his first marriage. We moved slowly, coffee dates while our kids were in school, then carefully orchestrated outings where all 4 children could interact in neutral territory. The day he proposed, I made one thing crystal clear. We become one family or we don't do this at all. "Absolutely," he'd promised, squeezing my hand. "One home, one family, equal love." The Victorian house on Maple Street was our fresh start. 5 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a backyard big enough for a trampoline and Sophie's dream garden. We decorated together, creating spaces that belonged to everyone. At first, things seemed promising. Cameron, though quiet, would sometimes join Lucas for video games. Madison occasionally let Sophie borrow her nail polish. There were movie nights with popcorn, Sunday brunches with pancakes shaped like their initials. But beneath the surface, fault lines were forming. "We'll ask our mom," became their favorite phrase whenever I suggested anything. "You're not really in charge of us," Madison would mutter when asked to load the dishwasher. "That's not how mom does it," Cameron would say, transforming the most innocent request into a comparison I couldn't win. I kept trying. God knows I tried. I learned Cameron's favorite dessert, key lime pie with extra whipped cream. I drove Madison to dance classes 3 times a week without complaint. I attended every school event, helped with science projects, and made sure birthdays were celebrated with their favorite meals and thoughtfully chosen gifts. But the more I gave, the more they seemed to resent me. Greg would shrug it off. "They're teenagers, Diane. It's a phase. Just give them time." Time, it turned out, only made things worse. 6 months ago, I found Sophie crying in her room, hugging her sketchbook to her chest. "What happened, sweetie?" I asked, sitting beside her on the bed, decorated with the constellation quilt we'd picked out together. "Madison told her friends I was weird," she whispered. "They laughed at my drawings at lunch." A week later, Lucas stopped asking Cameron to play basketball in the driveway after too many "I'm busy" responses. I watched my children, my bright, loving children, start to dim their own lights in response to the chill from their step-siblings. Still, I persisted. I believed in the power of consistency, in showing up day after day until the walls came down. I believed in the family we could be. Then came the Brookstone Block Party, an annual tradition in our small Georgia town. As co-chair of the planning committee, I'd spent months coordinating food trucks, local bands, and activities for the children. I'd used our joint account to pay for extra string lights that transformed the town square into something magical. Everything was perfect. The weather cooperated with one of those golden late spring evenings that make the South feel blessed. The mayor gave his usual speech about community and togetherness. Local businesses had donated raffle prizes that had everyone buzzing. When it came time to thank the volunteers, I suggested Cameron and Madison take the microphone, an opportunity for them to be seen as contributing members of the community, to feel included in our town life. I never imagined they would use that moment to draw a line so clear, so public, between us. She's just our stepmom. We only listen to our real mom. The words still echo in my head. Not because they were new. They'd been saying versions of this behind closed doors for 2 years, but because they'd finally said out loud what they'd been demonstrating all along. And in that moment, with the entire town as witness, I finally understood. I'd been fighting a battle I couldn't win. Not alone. Not without Greg truly standing beside me. As I walked away from that stage, phone in hand, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not even hurt, though that was certainly there. What I felt was clarity. Some battles aren't won by fighting harder. Sometimes you have to step back and let the consequences speak for themselves. Mayor Jackson met me at the edge of the square. Concern etched across his face. "Diane, everything okay?" "No," I said simply. "But it will be. I need a witness for what happens next." "Mayor." Jackson and I walked the 3 blocks to our house in silence. The evening air felt thick with unspoken words as cicadas chirped their endless summer song from the old oak trees lining the street. "I'm not trying to create drama," I finally said as we approached our front porch. "I just need someone the community trusts to see what I'm doing, so there's no misunderstanding later." The mayor nodded, his silver hair catching the streetlight. Sometimes witness is the most powerful thing one person can offer another. I unlocked the door with my key, perhaps for the last time. The house was quiet, empty while everyone was still at the block party. I moved with purpose, Mayor Jackson following at a respectful distance. First, I accessed the smart home app on my phone and changed all the codes to our electronic locks. Then I methodically logged out of every streaming service, the ones I paid for monthly from my personal account. "Would you mind noting the time?" I asked the mayor. He checked his watch. 9:45 p.m. I nodded, continuing my quiet work. I disconnected the Wi-Fi router I had purchased when we moved in. I removed Cameron's and Madison's phones from the family plan I managed. Finally, I took a notepad from the kitchen drawer and wrote a simple message. "I've given everything I could, but I won't allow myself or my children to be disrespected in our own home. Since I'm not a parent, I won't carry the responsibilities of one. Your kids, your turn." I left it on the kitchen island, propped against the fruit bowl that I had filled with apples just that morning. "What now?" Mayor Jackson asked quietly. "Now we leave," I said. "I'll be staying at my sister's place with Sophie and Lucas until this is resolved." As we walked back toward the square, the mayor cleared his throat. "I've known Greg since he was Cameron's age. He's a good man, but he's been a coward when it comes to his children," I finished. "And that stops tonight." The text started. At 11:30 p.m., just as Sophie and Lucas were finally drifting to sleep in my sister Janet's guest bedroom. Greg. "What the hell, Diane? We can't get into the house." Greg. "Are you serious right now?" Greg. "The kids are tired. This is crazy. Call me back." I didn't respond. At 12:15 a.m., the calls began. I silenced my phone. By morning, there were 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Some from Greg, some from Cameron's phone, even one from Madison. I read them all, but answered none. "Are you sure about this?" Janet asked, handing me coffee in her sunny kitchen while the kids ate cereal at the table. My sister had always been my rock, the one person who had supported me without question through my divorce, single motherhood, and remarriage. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. "I've spent 2 years being patient, understanding, loving, and look where it got me. They stood on stage and humiliated me in front of the entire town. And Greg just stood there," Janet finished, her eyes narrowing. She'd never fully trusted him, always worried he wasn't strong enough to handle his children. "He just stood there," I confirmed. Sophie looked up from her cereal. "Are we going home today, Mom?" The question broke my heart a little. "Not today, sweetheart. We're having a little vacation at Aunt Janet's for a bit." "Because of what Cameron and Madison said?" Lucas asked, his small face serious. "Children always understand more than we give them credit for." "Yes," I said simply. "Sometimes people need space to figure things out. They were mean. Sophie said. They're always mean when Dad isn't looking. And there it was. The truth I'd suspected but never confirmed. The dynamic was different when Greg wasn't around to witness it. By day 3, Greg's messages had changed tone. Greg, Cameron is failing his math test tomorrow because he can't access his study guides online. Greg, Madison missed dance because I couldn't leave work early to drive her. Greg, I called Melissa. She says this is my problem to fix. She won't help. Greg, please, Diane. I don't know how to do this alone. Melissa was their mother, a woman I'd met exactly twice, both times with tight smiles and cold evaluations. She lived an hour away with her new husband, saw the kids every other weekend, and made it clear that weekday parenting was Greg's domain. On day 5, I finally responded to one of his messages. Me. I'm not angry, Greg. I'm done. I can't build a family with someone who won't stand up for me or my children. His response came immediately. Greg, I'll do better, I promise. Just come home so we can talk. Me. No. You need to talk to your children first. They need to understand what they did and why it matters. Greg, they're just kids, Diane. Me. They're old. Enough to know better. And you're old enough to teach them. I put the phone down and took Sophie and Lucas to the park. I wouldn't let this situation steal more joy from their lives than it already had. That evening, Janet brought in the mail with a strange expression. This was on the porch, she said, handing me a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a house key, not our electronic key fob, but an actual metal key, and a note in Cameron's handwriting. Dad had the locks changed back to regular ones. He said to give you this. I'm sorry about what I said. It wasn't much, but it was something. A crack in the wall they'd built. The next morning, I received a text from Madison, the first direct message she'd ever sent me. Madison, the house is a mess without you. Dad burnt dinner. Twice. Can you tell Sophie I'm sorry? I showed the message to Sophie, who considered it with the serious deliberation only a 10-year-old can muster. Do you think she means it? Sophie asked. I don't know, I answered honestly. But I think she's starting to understand what she lost. That night, as I tucked Lucas into bed, he asked the question I'd been dreading. Are you and Dad getting divorced like you and my real dad did? I sat on the edge of the bed, stroking his hair. I don't know yet, buddy, but I want you to understand something important. None of this is your fault. And no matter what happens with Greg and me, you are loved. But I like our house, he said quietly. I like my room with the solar system ceiling. I know, I whispered, my heart breaking a little more. I like it too. When both kids were asleep, I sat on Janet's back porch and finally allowed myself to cry. For the family I'd tried to build, for the home I'd poured my heart into, for the stepchildren I truly wanted to love me, and for my own children who deserved stability and acceptance. The tears came hot and fast, but they didn't last long. I wasn't broken, just changing course. My phone lit up with a new message. Greg, we need to talk. All of us, please. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Me. When? Greg. Tomorrow. 6 p.m. I'll bring dinner. Me. Okay. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in days, I felt ready to face it. Not as the perpetually understanding, endlessly forgiving stepmom, but as a woman who knew her worth and was prepared to demand the respect she deserved. The invisible lines had been drawn long ago. Now they were finally visible to everyone. And sometimes, making things visible is the first step toward real change. By 5:45 p.m. the next day, Janet's living room had been transformed into neutral territory. I had asked her to take Sophie and Lucas for ice cream, wanting this first conversation to happen without them present. Some battles children shouldn't have to witness. At exactly 6, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my hands over my jeans, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Greg stood there holding 2 large pizza boxes, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Behind him, Cameron and Madison waited, both staring at the ground. They looked smaller somehow, less sure of themselves than they had on that stage. Come in, I said simply, stepping aside. No one spoke as they filed into the living room. Greg set the pizzas on the coffee table, but no one moved to open them. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Greg finally said, his voice rough. I know we have a lot to talk about. We do, I agreed, sitting in Janet's armchair while they took the couch. But first, I think Cameron and Madison have something to say. Madison looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked 14 instead of trying to seem older. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What I said at the block party was mean and not even true. Not true? I asked, keeping my voice level. She shook her head. I just wanted to hurt you. Because... Her voice trailed off. Because why, Madison? Because you were making Dad happy, she finally said. And if he's happy with you, then he's never going back to Mom. There it was, the truth we'd all known but never acknowledged. Madison had been holding on to the fantasy of her parents reuniting, and I was the obstacle in that dream. I turned to Cameron, who was studying his hands intently. Cameron? He looked up, his jaw tight. I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have said that stuff, especially not in front of everyone. Why did you? I asked. He shrugged, that teenage gesture that usually drove me crazy. But this time, I waited. I don't know. Madison and I were talking before, and we were mad because you made us come to this stupid block party instead of letting me go to Jason's, and Madison was missing some dance thing. So you decided to humiliate me publicly? He winced. It sounds really bad when you say it like that. It was really bad, Cameron. I kept my voice steady. Not just for me, but for Sophie and Lucas too. Did you think about how they felt, hearing their step-siblings reject their mother in front of the whole town? Both teenagers looked genuinely stricken at this. I clearly hadn't occurred to them how their actions would affect the younger children. I didn't think, Madison started. That's the problem, I interrupted. Neither of you have been thinking about anyone but yourselves. For 2 years, I've tried to make you feel welcome, loved, and part of our family. I've driven you to practices, helped with homework, cooked your favorite meals, celebrated your birthdays. My voice cracked slightly, and I paused to regain composure. But it's never been enough, has it? Because you decided from day one that I wasn't worth respecting. Greg cleared his throat. Diane, they're apologizing. I'm not finished, I said firmly. This isn't just about what happened at the block party. This is about 2 years of dismissal and disrespect. And it's about you. Greg, allowing it to happen. The room fell silent again. Greg looked like I'd slapped him. You stood there, I continued, my voice quieter now. You stood there while your children publicly disrespected me and you said nothing. You've been standing there for 2 years, watching it happen in smaller ways every day, and doing nothing. I didn't know what to say, he admitted, looking defeated. I was shocked. That's not good enough anymore, I said. I deserve better. Sophie and Lucas deserve better. Cameron spoke up unexpectedly. You're right. Everyone turned to look at him. We've been jerks, he continued. And Dad never really called us on it. He'd say stuff like, be nice to Diane, but then never follow through when we weren't. Madison nodded reluctantly. And when you left, everything fell apart. Dad doesn't know where anything is. He can't cook. He forgot I had dance rehearsal yesterday, and Cameron's math teacher called because he missed an assignment. It's been a wake-up call, Greg admitted. I've realized how much you do for all of us, how much I've taken for granted. It's not about the cooking or the driving or keeping track of schedules, I said. It's about respect. It's about being a united front as parents. It's about making sure all 4 children feel safe and valued in our home. I want that too, Greg said, leaning forward. I want us to come home. I want to fix this. I took a deep breath. I'm not sure it can be fixed, Greg. Not unless things change fundamentally. Tell us what you need, he said. And for the first time in our marriage, I felt like he was truly listening. So I told them. I laid out exactly what would have to change for me to consider coming home. There would be consequences for disrespect. Greg would need to back me up, consistently and visibly. Family therapy was non-negotiable. And most importantly, all 4 children would be treated equally, with the same rules, the same expectations, and the same love. Can you do that? I asked when I'd finished. All of you? They looked at each other, and then Greg nodded. Yes, whatever it takes. We'll try, Cameron said, more sincerely than I'd ever heard him speak to me. I will too, Madison added quietly. It won't be easy, I warned them. We have a lot of patterns to break. But we're worth it, right? Greg asked, and the vulnerability in his voice nearly broke me. Our family is worth fighting for? I thought about Sophie and Lucas, about the home we'd created, about the potential I still saw in this blended family of ours. Yes, I finally said, but I need time. I'm not moving back tonight. I need to see real change first. Greg nodded, understanding in his eyes. We'll show you. The next 2 weeks became a test period. I brought Sophie and Lucas to the house for dinner 3 times, watching carefully how Cameron and Madison interacted with them. I observed how Greg handled moments of tension or disrespect. There were awkward moments, certainly. Years of established patterns don't disappear overnight. But I also saw genuine effort. Cameron offered to help Lucas with his science project. Madison asked Sophie if she wanted to learn some dance moves. And most importantly, Greg stepped up, redirecting his older children when they slipped into old habits, affirming my authority as an equal parent in the household. One evening, as Greg walked me to my car after dinner, he handed me a business card. "Family therapist," he explained. "I've scheduled our first appointment for next Thursday if that works for you." I studied the card, feeling a flutter of hope. "You're serious about this?" "I've never been more serious about anything," he said. "I almost lost you, lost our family. I don't want to make that mistake again." On the drive back to Janet's, I found myself smiling for the first time in weeks. Change was possible, not guaranteed, but possible. The next morning, I received a text from Madison. "Madison, do you think you could help me with my history project? Dad's trying, but he doesn't get it. If you're not too busy." It was the first time she'd ever asked for my help directly. Me: "I'd be happy to. When would you like to work on it?" Madison: "Today after school? I could walk to Aunt Janet's if that's easier." I stared at the text, surprised by her willingness to come to me. Me: "That sounds perfect. I'll make cookies." Madison: "The snickerdoodles? Those are my favorite." Another first, an admission that she enjoyed something I made. Me: "Snickerdoodles it is." That afternoon, Madison arrived with her backpack and an uncharacteristic nervousness. We spread her project materials across Janet's dining table, and I helped her organize her research on the civil rights movement. As we worked, I noticed her stealing glances at me. "Is everything okay?" I finally asked. She bit her lip. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you and Dad getting divorced?" The question hung in the air between us. I set down my pen. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "That depends on a lot of things." "Because of what Cameron and I did?" "Partly," I admitted. "But also because your dad and I need to figure out if we can be the parents all four of you need us to be." She nodded slowly. "I don't want you to leave. I know I acted like I did, but the house feels wrong without you there." "Thank you for telling me that," I said, touched by her candor. "I was awful to you," she continued, her eyes filling with tears. "Because I thought if I was mean enough, you'd go away and Dad would go back to Mom. But now I know that's not going to happen, and I don't want to lose another mother figure." "Another?" Madison wiped at her eyes. "Mom's always busy with her new husband and their baby. She doesn't really have time for us anymore." My heart broke for her. No wonder she'd been so resistant. She'd already experienced one maternal rejection. "Madison," I said gently, "I'm not going anywhere. Regardless of what happens between your dad and me, you and Cameron are part of my life now." For the first time since I'd known her, Madison initiated physical contact, leaning into my side. I wrapped an arm around her thin shoulders and felt her relax. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. But it was a beginning. The family therapy office smelled like lavender and new carpet. Dr. Eleanor Hayes, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense posture, had arranged 6 chairs in a circle. No desk between us, nowhere to hide. "I'd like to start by establishing some ground rules," she said once we were all seated. Greg and me, Cameron and Madison, Sophie and Lucas. "In this room, we speak our truth. We don't interrupt. We don't judge. And most importantly, we recognize that everyone's feelings are valid, even when they're uncomfortable." Lucas, always my literal child, raised his hand. "What if someone's feelings are based on something that isn't true?" Dr. Hayes smiled. "Excellent question. Even then, the feeling itself is real and deserves respect. But you're right that we should also clarify facts when necessary." She turned to the group. "Today, I want to understand how each of you experiences this family. Who would like to start?" To everyone's surprise, Cameron spoke first. "I guess I will." He shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable but determined. Before Dad married Diane, it was just the 3 of us most of the time. Mom was already getting distant, spending more time with Bruce. He glanced at Madison, who nodded encouragement. When Dad told us he was getting married again, I pretended it was fine, but I was angry. Nobody asked us if we wanted a new mom or new siblings. It just happened. Dr. Hayes nodded. "And how did you express that anger?" Cameron looked down. "I shut Diane out. I was polite when Dad was around, but otherwise I acted like she wasn't really my parent." "And how do you feel now?" Dr. Hayes asked. Stupid, he admitted, and embarrassed, because Diane never did anything wrong. She was actually nice, all the time, even when I was being a jerk. I felt my throat tighten at his words. Madison spoke next, her voice small but steady. I wanted Mom and Dad to get back together. I thought if we were mean enough to Diane, she'd leave and everything would go back to how it was before. And did you believe that would actually happen? Dr. Hayes asked gently. Madison shook her head. Not really. I think I knew Mom and Dad were over, but it was easier to blame Diane than accept it. Sophie, who had been listening intently, piped up. I was excited to have a bigger family, but then Cameron and Madison made me feel like I wasn't supposed to be there. How did they do that? Dr. Hayes prompted. They'd whisper when I came into a room, or Madison would tell her friends not to talk to me at school because I was weird. Sophie's voice wavered. It made me feel like there was something wrong with me. I reached for her hand, squeezing gently. This was the first time I'd heard the full extent of what she'd been experiencing. Lucas, not to be outdone by his sister, added, They never wanted to play? With me. Cameron said he was too old for kid stuff, but I saw him playing basketball with his friends who have little brothers. Cameron had the grace to look ashamed. I'm sorry, buddy. That wasn't cool. Dr. Hayes turned to me. And you, Diane? How have you experienced this family? I took a deep breath. I came into this marriage believing we could build something beautiful together. A home where all 4 children felt equally valued and loved. Where Greg and I were partners, backing each other up. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Instead, I've often felt like an outsider in my own home, like I'm constantly auditioning for a role I'll never get. I cook meals that Cameron and Madison barely acknowledge. I help with homework but get told that's not how Mom would do it. I enforce rules that Greg doesn't back up. I looked directly at my husband. And through it all, Greg has tried to stay neutral, which means no one is ever held accountable for how they treat me or my children. Greg flinched visibly. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten, he said, his voice hoarse. I thought if I just gave it time, everyone would adjust. But that's not how family works, Dr. Hayes observed. Families need structure, boundaries, and clear expectations. Children, even teenagers, look to parents for guidance on how to treat others. She turned to Greg. By remaining neutral when your children disrespected Diane, what message were you sending? He ran a hand over his face. That it was acceptable. That Diane's feelings didn't matter as much as keeping the peace. Exactly, Dr. Hayes said. And by extension, that Sophie's and Lucas's feelings didn't matter either. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this truth. So where do we go from here? Greg finally asked. Dr. Hayes smiled. That's the right question. And the answer starts with acknowledging that you're not actually blending 2 families. You're creating a new one, with its own rules, traditions, and ways of showing respect and love. She looked around the circle. It will take time. There will be setbacks. But if everyone in this room commits to honesty and effort, you can build something beautiful together. For the first time in months, I felt a genuine spark of hope. The changes were small at first. Cameron made a point of asking Lucas if he wanted to shoot hoops after school. Madison invited Sophie to help with a TikTok dance routine. Greg began stepping in immediately when he noticed disrespect, no longer allowing small slights to pass unchallenged. 3 weeks after our first therapy session, I finally agreed to move back home, with conditions. We established a family meeting every Sunday night to discuss the week ahead and address any issues that had arisen. We created a chore chart that applied equally to all children, with age-appropriate tasks. And most importantly, we agreed that respect was non-negotiable, from everyone to everyone. The first night back, I found a handmade card on my pillow. The front showed a clumsily drawn house with 6 stick figures holding hands. Inside, in Madison's careful handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for giving us another chance." Later that week, as I was helping Cameron with college application essays, he suddenly put down his pen. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Of course." The day after the block party, when you weren't here and the Wi-Fi was off and everything was chaos, I called Mom to see if we could stay with her instead. I tensed, waiting for the rest. She said no. Said she had plans with Bruce and the baby, and Dad needed to figure out his own problems. He stared at his essay, not meeting my eyes. That's when I realized she wasn't coming back. That this, you, Dad, Sophie, Lucas, this is our family now. I reached out, squeezing his shoulder. "I'm sorry she disappointed you." "I'm not," he said, finally looking up, because it made me see what was right in front of me all along. These moments of connection accumulated slowly, small truths shared, small kindnesses offered. The walls between us didn't come down all at once, but brick by brick, day by day. There were still difficult days, times when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves, moments when someone, usually Madison, would test boundaries to see if they still held. But we kept talking, kept showing up, kept trying. One evening, 6 weeks after moving back home, I was folding laundry in the living room when I overheard Madison on the phone in the kitchen. "No, I can't come over. It's Diane's birthday and we're doing a family dinner." "What?" "No, not my stepmom. My other mom." "Yeah, I guess I do have two moms now." "So what?" I pretended not to have heard when she came into the living room, but my heart felt fuller than it had in years. That night, as Greg and I got ready for bed, he wrapped his arms around me from behind, meeting my eyes in the bathroom mirror. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For not giving up on us. For teaching me how to be a better father. A better husband." I turned in his arms. "We're still learning, all of us." "I know," he said, "but now we're learning together." As I drifted off to sleep that night, I thought about the journey we'd been on, from that humiliating moment on stage to this quiet peace we were building together. It hadn't been easy. It still wasn't perfect. But somewhere along the way, the house on Maple Street had finally become what I'd always hoped it would be, a home for all of us. 3 months after the block party incident, Brookstone held its annual fall festival. Unlike the block party, which centered around our neighborhood, the fall festival was a town-wide celebration: pumpkin carving contests, hayrides, local craft vendors, and the famous apple cider that Mayor Jackson's family had been making for generations. "Do we have to go?" Madison asked at breakfast, pushing her scrambled eggs around her plate. "Everyone's going to be talking about what happened." I looked up from packing Lucas's lunch. "What do you mean?" She exchanged glances with Cameron. "You know, what we said at the block party. Everyone in town saw it. They also saw what happened after," Cameron added. "When you moved out and everything." I put down the sandwich I was wrapping. "Are people still talking about that?" "Mrs. Peterson mentioned it at dance class last week," Madison admitted. "She asked if everything was okay at home now." It was mortifying. I understood their concern. In a town like Brookstone, population 8,500, news traveled fast and lingered longer. What had happened that night had undoubtedly become local legend: the stepmom who changed the locks and walked away. Greg entered the kitchen, catching the tail end of our conversation. "If we don't go, people will talk even more," he pointed out, pouring himself coffee. "They'll think we're hiding." "We're not hiding," I said firmly. "We're healing. There's a difference." "So we're not going?" Sophie asked, looking disappointed. She'd been looking forward to the pumpkin decorating contest. I looked at my blended family gathered around the breakfast table. The family. We were still learning to be. Hiding wouldn't serve any of us. "We're going," I decided. "Together. And if anyone has something to say about what happened, we'll handle it with dignity." Cameron nodded slowly. "Together." It was the first time he'd echoed my words like that. A small thing, perhaps, but it felt significant. The town square was transformed for the festival. Hay bales created seating, areas around a temporary stage. Strings of orange and yellow lights crisscrossed overhead. The air smelled of caramel apples, wood smoke, and the particular crispness that only mid-October brings to Georgia. We moved through the festival as a unit, the 6 of us sticking closer together than we might have before. I noticed the glances, the whispers as we passed. Some sympathetic, some curious, a few clearly judging. Mayor Jackson spotted us near the cider stand and made his way over. "The Phillips family," he boomed, seeming genuinely pleased to see us. "Glad you could all make it." Greg shook his hand. "Wouldn't miss it, Mayor." "And Diane," the mayor said, his voice softening. "Good to see you back where you belong." I smiled, appreciating his subtle acknowledgement of everything that had transpired since he'd witnessed my quiet rebellion 3 months ago. "Thank you for the wonderful festival," I said. "The children have been looking forward to it all week." Mayor Jackson leaned in slightly. "You know, what you did that night, it made an impression on a lot of folks around here, standing up for yourself that way." Before I could respond, Madison stepped forward unexpectedly. "Mayor Jackson, I want to apologize for what I said at the block party. It was disrespectful and not true." The mayor's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he recovered quickly. "That's mighty mature of you to say, Madison." Apology accepted. "I'm sorry too," Cameron added, shifting uncomfortably but holding his ground. "We were wrong." Mayor Jackson nodded thoughtfully. Well, now this is something. You know, in my 30 years as mayor, I've learned that the strongest families aren't the ones who never have problems. They're the ones who face their problems head on. He looked at all 6 of us. Seems to me that's exactly what you folks have done. As we continued through the festival, I felt a weight lifting. The whispers and glances seemed less important now. What mattered was that we were here, together, working through our challenges in full view of the community that had witnessed our lowest moment. Sophie won 2nd place in the pumpkin decorating contest with her elaborate owl design. Lucas devoured 3 caramel apples in succession, resulting in a sugar rush that had him bouncing between booths. Greg won the horseshoe toss, much to Cameron's competitive chagrin. And Madison, my difficult, complex stepdaughter, stayed by my side for most of the evening, occasionally slipping her hand into mine when the crowd grew too dense. As dusk fell and the festival lights twinkled overhead, we found ourselves near the gazebo where a local band was playing. Couples swayed to a slow country ballad, and Greg extended his hand to me. Dance with me? I took his hand, letting him lead me into the gentle rhythm. Over his shoulder, I could see our 4 children watching. Sophie and Lucas giggling, Cameron pretending to be too cool for the display, Madison with an expression I couldn't quite read. Look at them, Greg murmured, following my gaze. They're going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. I nodded against his shoulder, allowing myself to believe it. Later that night, as we were leaving the festival, we ran into Melissa, Greg's ex-wife, and her husband, Bruce. Their 1-year-old son was asleep in a stroller. The encounter could have been awkward, but something had shifted in our family dynamic. Greg stood tall beside me, his arm around my waist. Cameron and Madison greeted their mother with genuine warmth, but without the desperate yearning I'd seen in the past. The kids look good, Melissa said to me, surprising everyone. Happy. They are, I replied simply. We all are. She nodded, a complicated mix of emotions crossing her face. Good, that's good. As we walked to our car, Madison fell into step beside me. That was weird, she said. Mom being nice to you. People change, I offered. Sometimes they surprise you. Madison was quiet for a moment. I think she feels guilty for not being there for us more. Perhaps. I used to be so angry about that, Madison continued, about her choosing Bruce and the baby over us. I think that's why I was so horrible to you. It was easier to blame you than admit my own mom didn't want me around all the time. The raw honesty of her words caught me off guard. Madison, but now, I get it, she interrupted. You can love more than one person. Having you doesn't mean I don't still have mom. It just means I have more people looking out for me, and that's actually pretty great. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close as we walked. No words seemed adequate for the moment. Sometimes the most profound healings happen in the quietest ways. Thanksgiving arrived with Georgia's typical meteorological confusion. 65 degrees and sunny, causing us to open windows despite the pumpkin pies baking in the oven. Our house on Maple Street bustled with activity as we prepared for our first major holiday as a truly blended family. Greg's parents were coming, as were Janet and her husband. Melissa had the kids for Christmas this year, so this holiday was ours to establish new traditions. Diane? Cameron called from the dining room. Is this tablecloth the right one? I poked my head in to see him carefully spreading a cream-colored cloth with embroidered fall leaves, the one my grandmother had made years ago. Perfect, I said. Thanks for remembering which one I wanted. He nodded, pleased with himself. Lucas is helping me with the silverware. He's actually pretty good at setting the table. He likes things to be in order, I said. Always has. Cameron grinned. Like someone else I know. I have no idea what you're talking about, I replied with mock innocence, making us both laugh. In the kitchen, Madison and Sophie worked side by side, decorating sugar cookies shaped like leaves. Madison had discovered a talent for baking in recent months, often joining me for weekend projects that filled the house with sweet scents and comfortable conversation. Sophie, that's gorgeous, Madison exclaimed, admiring her sister's carefully piped orange icing. Where did you learn to do that? From watching you, Sophie replied simply. I stepped back into the kitchen, overwhelmed by the scene, my stepdaughter and daughter working together, giggling over smudged frosting and sprinkles gone astray. 6 months ago, this tableau would have seemed impossible. Greg came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Happy? He murmured. Very, I whispered back, though I'm still a little nervous about dinner. It'll be fine, he assured me. Mom and Dad already love you, and Janet practically wants to adopt Cameron and Madison. Was right, of course. The dinner went beautifully. Greg's father telling embarrassing stories about Greg's childhood. Janet bringing out old photos of Sophie and Lucas as babies. Everyone complimenting Madison's cookies and Cameron's perfectly set table. After the meal, as everyone relaxed in the living room with coffee and pie, Greg's mother pulled me aside. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice low. "After what happened at that block party, which, yes, we heard about all the way in Atlanta, I was worried. Worried you'd leave for good, that the family would fall apart. I waited, unsure where she was going with this. But looking at all of you tonight," she squeezed my hand, "you've done something remarkable, Diane. You've built a real family out of broken pieces. That takes a special kind of strength." Her words stayed with me long after our guests had gone, and the dishes were washed and put away. As I moved through the quiet house, turning off lights and checking that doors were locked, I reflected on the journey we'd taken. From that humiliating moment on stage to this peaceful Thanksgiving night, the path hadn't been straight or easy. There had been therapy, sessions where painful truths emerged, family meetings that devolved into tears, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But we had persevered. We had rebuilt. Not the family I had initially envisioned, perhaps, but something stronger. A family tested by fire and forged in honest communication. That night, as Greg and I lay in bed, I said, "Your mother called me remarkable. Today, you are," he murmured sleepily. "Not me," I corrected. "Us. All 6 of us. What we've built together." He propped himself up on one elbow. "You know what I'm thankful for this year? That you had the courage to walk away that night. If you hadn't, we might still be stuck in those toxic patterns. Sometimes you have to break something to fix it properly," I said. He nodded, understanding. "Perfectly. Sometimes the strongest love is the one that knows when to step back." As I drifted towards sleep, I thought about the echoes of that night 3 months ago, how one moment of clarity had rippled outward, changing everything in its path. The locks I'd changed, the Wi-Fi I'd disconnected, the boundaries I'd finally established, not out of vengeance, but out of self-respect. Not to punish, but to protect what mattered most. And in doing so, I had helped our family find its way home. December arrived with an unusual cold snap that dusted Brookstone with a rare coating of snow, just enough to cancel school and send children rushing outdoors with makeshift sleds and dreams of snowmen. Our house on Maple Street was no exception. Lucas woke everyone at 6 a.m. running through the hallways, shouting about the miracle outside our windows. By 7, all 4 children were bundled in mismatched winter gear, their breaths forming clouds in the frigid air as they attempted to build a snowman with the scant inch of accumulation. Greg and I watched from the porch, clutching steaming mugs of coffee. "They look happy," he observed, his voice still rough with sleep. I nodded, watching as Cameron showed Lucas how to pack the snow more tightly, while Madison helped Sophie find pebbles for the snowman's face. "They are happy," I agreed. Most of the time, anyway. It hadn't been perfect, our rebuilding. There were still occasional flare-ups, moments when Madison's insecurity manifested as sharpness, or when Cameron retreated into moody silence. But the difference now was that we addressed these moments directly, no longer allowing resentments to fester beneath the surface. "The Christmas issue is coming up," Greg said carefully. "Have you thought about what you want to do while the kids are with Melissa?" I sipped my coffee, considering. By our custody arrangement, Cameron and Madison would spend December 23rd through 26th with their mother this year. It would be our first Christmas apart since the block party incident. "I think we should celebrate on the 22nd, I said. "Do all our traditions then. Tree, presents, the works. Then when they come back on the 27th, we can have a relaxed family day together." Greg nodded. "That sounds perfect. Have you talked to the kids about it?" "Not yet. I wanted to discuss it with you first." He smiled, squeezing my hand. "See? That's why we work now. We plan together." I returned his smile, remembering how different things had been a year ago. Me making all the holiday plans alone, hoping the teenagers would participate without complaint. Greg remaining passive in the face of their resistance. "Mom! Dad! Come look!" Sophie called from the yard, breaking into our moment. We walked down the porch steps to admire the world's smallest snowman, barely a foot tall, with twigs for arms and pebbles forming a crooked smile. "His name is Herbert," Lucas announced proudly. "Herbert the snowman," Greg repeated solemnly. "A fine addition to our family." "Can we take a picture with him?" Madison asked, already pulling out her phone. Before he melts? Excellent idea, I agreed. We gathered around Herbert, all 6 of us, crouching awkwardly in the snow. Madison held her phone out, trying to get everyone in the frame. Here, let me, called a voice from the sidewalk. Mayor Jackson stood there, bundled in a heavy coat, his dog, a golden retriever named Liberty, straining at the leash beside him. Morning constitutional, he explained, taking Madison's phone. Even in the snow. Now everyone say, Herbert. Herbert? We chorused, laughing as the camera clicked. The mayor handed the phone back to Madison, who immediately began examining the photo. It's perfect, she declared. First family snow portrait. As we invited the mayor up for coffee to warm his hands, I caught Cameron looking at the photo over Madison's shoulder, a thoughtful expression on his face. Later, after the mayor had continued his walk and the kids had come inside to warm up, I found Cameron in the kitchen making hot chocolate. Need any help? I offered. He shook his head. I've got it. Thanks, though. I started to leave, but he called me back. Diane, can I show you something? Curious, I returned to the kitchen island. Cameron pulled out his phone and brought up Instagram, navigating to his profile. His latest post was the photo. From this morning, all 6 of us around Herbert the tiny snowman. But it was the caption that caught my breath. Snow day with the fam. Wouldn't trade them for anything. Blessed family second chances. I looked up to find him watching me intently, as if gauging my reaction. Cameron, I began, not quite sure what to say. I know it's cheesy, he said quickly. The hashtags and stuff, but I wanted people to see, that we're good now, that we're a real family. I felt my eyes filling with tears. It's not cheesy at all. It's beautiful. He ducked his head, embarrassed but pleased. Yeah, well, it's true. For a 16-year-old boy who had once refused to acknowledge me as any part of his family, this public declaration was nothing short of miraculous. The days leading up to Christmas were filled with the usual chaos, shopping for presents, baking cookies, addressing cards. But this year, there was a difference in how we approached it all. The teenagers participated without complaint, often taking initiative on tasks that would have required nagging in the past. Madison volunteered to help Sophie pick out gifts for her friends. Cameron drove Lucas to his school's holiday concert when Greg and I both had work commitments. Small things, perhaps, but meaningful in their consistency. Our Christmas celebration on the 22nd exceeded all my expectations. The living room glowed with lights from the tree we had decorated together. Presents spilled across the floor. The air smelled of cinnamon and pine. As we opened gifts, I was touched by the thoughtfulness of each. 1. Sophie had made watercolor bookmarks for everyone. Lucas had saved his allowance to buy small Lego sets, personalized to each person's interests, as he proudly explained. Cameron gave me a beautiful journal with a handwritten note inside. For all your thoughts and wisdom, thanks for not giving up on us. Madison's gift nearly undid me. A framed photo collage of our family, carefully arranged, to show the progression from awkward beginnings to genuine connection. In the center was a shot from Thanksgiving, all 6 of us laughing around the dinner table. I had a lot of pictures of just me, Cameron, and Dad, she explained quietly as I admired it. And then some with you, Sophie, and Lucas added in, but not many where we all look happy together. Not until recently. I hugged her, tightly, beyond words. Later, after the younger children had gone to bed, excited about Santa's imminent arrival despite our early celebration, Madison approached me in the kitchen where I was cleaning up. Can we talk? She asked. Of course, I said, setting down the dish towel. Everything okay? She fidgeted with the sleeve of her sweater. I'm nervous about going to Mom's tomorrow. Nervous? Why? We haven't been there since, since everything changed. She looked up at me. What if we fall back into old patterns? What if we come back different? I understood her fear immediately. Our family equilibrium still felt fragile sometimes, hard-won and easily disrupted. Madison, I said gently, what happened these past few months? It wasn't magic. It was work. Hard work that all of us did together. That doesn't disappear just because you spend a few days somewhere else. But what if the changes are inside you? I continued. In how you see yourself, how you treat others. Those go with you wherever you are. She considered this, then nodded slowly. I guess you're right. And if things get difficult there, you can always call or text. I'll be here. You promise? She asked, suddenly looking younger than her 14 years. I promise, I said firmly. Being a family isn't about being under the same roof all the time. It's about carrying each other in your hearts, no matter where you are. She hugged me then. A real hug, not the awkward, obligatory embraces of the past. Merry Christmas, Diane, she whispered. Merry Christmas, Madison. The house felt eerily quiet on Christmas morning. Sophie and Lucas still opened their Santa gifts with excitement, but there was a noticeable gap where Cameron's deep laugh and Madison's running commentary would normally be. By afternoon, both younger children were showing signs of missing their step-siblings. When will they be back? Lucas asked for the third time, looking forlornly at the new board game Cameron had given him, one that required at least 3 players. 2 more days, I reminded him. Why don't we FaceTime them later to say Merry Christmas? His face brightened. Can we show them what Santa brought? Absolutely. The video call that evening was chaotic and heartwarming. Cameron and Madison crowded together on one screen, showing off their gifts from their mother, while Sophie and Lucas took turns displaying their treasures. We miss you guys, Sophie said suddenly, during a lull in the show and tell. We miss you too, Squirt, Cameron replied without hesitation. The food's not as good here, Madison added with a grin. Mom ordered pizza for Christmas dinner. Pizza sounds awesome, Lucas exclaimed, making everyone laugh. After the kids had said their goodbyes, Greg and I took the phone for a private moment with Cameron and Madison. Everything going okay there? Greg asked. They exchanged a glance before Cameron answered. Yeah, it's fine. Different, but fine. Mom keeps asking about what happened, Madison added. About why we're suddenly okay with being a blended family. It's weird. What do you tell her? I asked carefully. Madison shrugged. The truth. That we were being jerks, and then we realized what we almost lost, and now we're trying to be better. She doesn't really get it, Cameron said. But that's okay. We do. After we hung up, Greg and I sat in companionable silence on the couch, the Christmas tree lights casting soft patterns across the room. They've grown up so much, Greg observed, in just a few months. We all have, I replied. You and me included. He nodded, taking my hand. I keep thinking about what might have happened if you hadn't taken that stand at the block party. If you'd just kept trying to make it work the way it was. We'd still be miserable, I said simply. All of us, in different ways. Thank you, he said, not for the first time, for being brave enough to break things so we could fix them properly. I leaned against his shoulder, watching the twinkling lights. Sometimes the strongest families are the ones that have been broken and mended. The cracks are where the light gets in. Outside, a fresh dusting of snow began to fall, covering Brookstone in a blanket of white. Nature's way of marking endings and beginnings, of showing how beauty can emerge from the coldest seasons. In 2 days, our family would be complete again, under one roof. But in the truest sense, we were already whole, connected by bonds that transcended physical presence, strengthened by the winter truths we had faced together. Spring in Brookstone brings azaleas, dogwoods, and the annual Community Awards Gala, a black tie affair where the town recognizes outstanding citizens for their contributions. It's held at the renovated textile mill downtown, a cavernous space with exposed brick walls and soaring ceilings draped in twinkling lights for the occasion. When the invitation arrived in our mailbox, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing, I assumed it was the standard courtesy extended to all residents. Are we going? Greg asked, loosening his tie after a long day at work. It's on a Friday night. We'd need a sitter for the kids. I scanned the invitation again. Actually, it says Philip's family at the top. I think all 6 of us are invited. Greg raised an eyebrow. That's unusual. They don't typically include children. Before we could discuss it further, the front door burst open as all 4 kids arrived home from school in their usual whirlwind of backpacks, lunchboxes, and overlapping stories. How was the math test? I asked Cameron as he raided the refrigerator. Crushed it, he replied with the easy confidence of a high school junior who had found his academic stride this year. Mr. Harmon said my proof approach was elegant. Mom! Sophie called from the living room. There's an envelope with my name on it. I followed her voice to find her holding a smaller version of the invitation we'd received, as were Lucas, Madison, and Cameron. We got kid invitations? Madison asked, puzzled. To that boring gala thing? Apparently so, I said, equally confused, though I have no idea why. Later that evening, after dinner had been cleared and homework was underway, my phone rang. Mayor Jackson's name flashed on the screen. Diane, glad I caught you, he said when I answered. I wanted to make sure you received the invitations for the gala. We did, thank you, though we're a bit surprised the children were included. He chuckled. Well, that's actually why I'm calling. The Community Impact Award this year is going to your family, all 6 of you. I nearly dropped the phone. I'm sorry, what? The Community Impact Award, he repeated. It's for families or groups who've made Brookstone a better place through their example. The committee voted unanimously. But why us? I managed to ask. There was a pause before the mayor continued, his voice gentler now. Diane, what happened at the block party last summer? And more importantly, what's happened since? It's inspired a lot of people. We've had 3 other blended families in town seek counseling. The high school started a support group for students navigating parental remarriages. I sat down at the kitchen island, stunned. Your family showed this town something important, he continued, that it's possible to face hard truths with dignity, to rebuild what's broken, to choose respect over resentment. That's the kind of example we want to celebrate. After hanging up, I gathered everyone in the living room to share the news. The reactions were predictably mixed. We have to go on stage? Lucas asked, eyes wide. I'll need a new dress, Madison declared immediately. Do I have to wear a tie? Cameron groaned. Will there be cake? Sophie wanted to know. But beneath the practical questions, I could see something else in their faces. A quiet pride, a recognition that our private journey had somehow mattered beyond the walls of our home. Greg took my hand, squeezing gently. We did good, he whispered. We did, I agreed, looking at our beautifully imperfect family sprawled across couches and floor cushions. Together. The night of the gala arrived with perfect April weather. Warm enough for spring dresses, but cool enough that Cameron didn't complain too much about his suit jacket. The textile mill glowed with candlelight and laughter as Brookstone citizens gathered in their finest attire. As we entered, I felt a moment of déjà vu, remembering the block party nearly a year ago. Another community gathering, another stage. But this time, we moved as a unit. A true family with no invisible lines dividing us. Philip's family, Mayor Jackson greeted us near the, entrance. Don't you all clean up nicely? Madison, that dress is stunning. Madison beamed, twirling in her emerald green dress, a compromise between her desire for something grown up and my insistence on age appropriate. When do we get the award? Lucas asked, straightforward as always. The mayor laughed. After dinner, young man. Think you can wait that long? Lucas nodded solemnly. I guess. As long as the food is good. Throughout dinner, I noticed people stopping by our table. Parents from school, neighbors, even Cameron's basketball coach, all offering quiet congratulations or sharing how our family's journey had affected them. My stepdaughter and I started therapy after the block party, confided Mrs. Reynolds, whose daughter was in Madison's class. Watching what your family went through made me realize we needed help too. By the time dessert was cleared and the award ceremony began, I felt a curious mix of emotions. Pride in how far we'd come, humility at being recognized for what had essentially been survival, and a lingering amazement that our private struggles had resonated so deeply with others. When Mayor Jackson called our names, we walked to the stage. Together, Greg and I in the middle, the 4 children flanking us like a perfectly balanced equation. The mayor handed Greg a crystal plaque engraved with our names and the words, Community Impact Award, for demonstrating the power of respect, resilience, and reconciliation. Would you like to say a few words? He asked, offering the microphone. Greg glanced at me, and I nodded encouragement. This was his moment too. The man who had learned to be not just a father, but a partner in parenting. Thank you for this honor, Greg began, his voice steady despite his nervousness with public speaking. Though I have to say, a year ago on a stage not far from here, we were making a very different kind of impact. Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. Many of you witnessed what happened that night at the block party. You saw my children publicly disrespect their stepmother. You saw a family fracturing at the seams. He paused, gathering his thoughts. What you didn't see was what happened next. The hard conversations, the tears, the therapy sessions, the daily work of rebuilding trust. He looked at Cameron and Madison. My older children showed incredible courage in facing their own behaviors and choosing to change. My younger stepchildren demonstrated forgiveness beyond their years. Finally, he turned to me. And my wife, Diane, she taught us all what real strength looks like. Not the kind that never breaks, but the kind that knows when to stand firm, when to step back, and how to build something beautiful from broken pieces. He handed me the microphone, and I took a deep breath. When we receive awards, we typically thank those who supported us. But tonight, I want to thank the people on this stage with me. I looked at each child in turn. These four remarkable young people who dared to build a new kind of family when the old models failed them. I reached for Greg's hand. And this man who had the courage to recognize his mistakes and grow from them. Turning back to the audience, I continued. Blending families isn't easy. There's no manual, no perfect formula. You're trying to merge different histories, different wounds, different expectations, all while the children involved are simply trying to survive changes they never asked for. I saw heads nodding throughout the room. What I've learned is that respect isn't automatic. It's earned. Through consistency, boundaries, and love. Sometimes the hardest parts of our journey are the most important. Sometimes you have to be willing to break something to rebuild it stronger. I gestured for the children to step forward. Cameron, Madison, Sophie, Lucas, would you like to add anything? They exchanged glances before Madison stepped toward the microphone. Just that. She hesitated, then found her confidence. Sometimes the family you fight the hardest is the one you need the most, and sometimes the person you push away is exactly who you should be holding on to. Cameron nodded, adding, we weren't exactly subtle about not wanting a blended family, but now I can't imagine life any other way. Sophie piped up. We're like a puzzle where the pieces didn't fit at first, but now they do. Lucas, never one to be outdone, grabbed the microphone last. And we still have movie nights with popcorn, but now everybody actually comes. Laughter and applause filled the room as we took our final bow and stepped off the stage. As we made our way back to our table, I noticed a woman standing by the exit. Petite, blonde, holding a sleeping toddler against her shoulder. Melissa. Our eyes met across the room, and after a moment's hesitation, she walked toward us. Congratulations, she said simply. I heard about the award and I wanted to see it. Mom? Madison exclaimed, surprised but clearly pleased. You came all the way from Atlanta? Melissa nodded. I wouldn't miss it. She looked at me directly. Thank you for taking care of them, for not giving up when it would have been easier to walk away. They're worth it, I replied honestly. Yes, she agreed. They are. As she turned to leave, Cameron called after her. Mom, why don't you join us for dessert? There's cake. A flash of emotion crossed her face. Surprise, followed by something that looked like regret, then cautious hope. I'd like that, she said softly. And so our family expanded yet again, making room at our table for the woman who had come before me, not as a rival, but as another adult who loved these children. Later that night, as we piled into our minivan to head home, award plaque carefully cradled in Sophie's lap, Madison leaned forward from the back seat. Diane? She asked. Yes? Do you think we could invite Mom to Sunday dinner sometimes? Not every week, but maybe once a month or something? I caught Greg's eye, seeing the question there. This wasn't a simple request. Blended families had enough complications without adding ex-spouses to the mix. But then I thought about what we'd just celebrated. The courage to build something new. Something that worked for the children caught between adult worlds. I think that would be fine, I said. As long as everyone's comfortable with it. Madison sat back, satisfied. Cool. Because family doesn't have to look like everybody else's, right? It just has to work for us. Out of the mouths of babes, I thought. Right, I agreed. It just has to work for us. As we drove through the quiet streets of Brookstone, past the town square where our story had pivoted nearly a year ago, I realized something profound. The public. Reckoning we just experienced wasn't about shame or vindication. It was about transformation, the kind that ripples outward, touching lives beyond our own. What had begun as a moment of humiliation had become a testimony of restoration. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful impact of all. 1 year to the day after the infamous block party incident, I stood in our kitchen arranging a platter of watermelon slices into a fan pattern. Through the window, I could see Greg setting up lawn chairs in the bed of his pickup truck, our prime viewing spot for tonight's festivities. Mom! Sophie called from the hallway. Have you seen my new sandals? The blue ones with the flowers. Check the mudroom, I called back, adding strawberries to the fruit platter. The house hummed with the familiar chaos of preparation. Lucas searching for his baseball cap, Madison hogging the upstairs bathroom to perfect her makeup, Cameron loading coolers with ice. Nervous? Greg asked, coming in from outside and catching me staring into space. A little, I admitted. It feels strange, going back to the block party after what happened last year. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. Different year, different family. I leaned back against him, taking comfort in his solid presence. You're right. I just keep having these flashes of how it felt, standing there while Cameron and Madison said things they regret deeply and have apologized for approximately 700 times since. He finished for me. I laughed, the tension easing from my shoulders. True. Very true. Besides, Greg added, you're not just attending this year. You're running the whole show. That was also true. In a twist that still surprised me, the neighborhood association had asked me to chair the block party committee this year. Apparently, my organizational skills had not gone unnoticed, even amid last year's drama. Mom! Lucas appeared in the kitchen doorway, cap firmly in place. Cameron says we should leave in 20 minutes if we want the good parking spot. Tell him we'll be ready, I promised. And make sure you have sunscreen on. He rolled his eyes dramatically, a new preteen affectation he'd been practicing. Already did. Cameron made us all put it on. I raised an eyebrow at Greg after Lucas dashed off. Cameron is enforcing sunscreen rules now? Apparently, watching you parent for a year has rubbed off on him, Greg chuckled. Yesterday, he lectured Madison about staying hydrated during her dance practice. These small transformations never ceased to amaze me. The ways our blended family had truly blended, borrowing each other's strengths, adopting each other's habits, becoming something wholly new yet perfectly right. The town square was already filling with people when we arrived, our truck loaded with chairs, coolers, and enough food to feed an army. The previous night's rain had cleared, leaving behind that particular golden light that makes Georgia evenings feel enchanted. Phillips family, Mayor Jackson called, waving us over to the volunteer check-in table. Right on time as usual. I handed him the clipboard with final vendor confirmations. Everything's set. The band will arrive at 6 for sound check. Food trucks are scheduled to start serving at 6:30, and the welcome speech is at 7. Exemplary as always, Diane, he said with a wink. Now, do you want me to introduce you before the speech, or would you prefer to just take the stage yourself? I hesitated, remembering the last time there had been a stage and microphones at this event. Actually, I was thinking we might do something different this year. As the sun began its slow descent, turning the sky pink and gold, families gathered around the square, spreading blankets and setting up chairs. The smell of barbecue and funnel cakes filled the air. Children darted between adults, their laughter carrying on the gentle evening breeze. At precisely 7 o'clock, Mayor Jackson took the microphone at the center of the square, where a small platform had been set up. Not a raised stage like last year, but a simple wooden deck draped with string lights. Welcome, everyone, to Brookstone's annual block party, he announced to enthusiastic applause. Before we get this party officially started, I've been asked to do things a little differently this year. He gestured toward where our family stood near the platform. Instead of one person giving the welcome speech, the Phillips family would like to say a few words together. A curious murmur ran through the crowd as the 6 of us stepped onto the platform. I could feel the collective memory of last year's incident hovering in the air. Many of these same people had witnessed Cameron and Madison's public declaration, my quiet exit, the aftermath that had rippled through our community. Greg spoke first, his voice clear and confident. Good evening, neighbors and friends. For those who don't know us, I'm Greg Phillips. This is my wife Diane and our children, Cameron, Madison, Sophie, and Lucas. I stepped forward. Some of you might remember that our family had a significant moment at this event last year. Gentle laughter acknowledged the understatement. What you saw then was a family in crisis, I continued. What you see now is a family that has healed. Not perfectly, we still have our moments, but authentically. Madison moved to my side, no longer the defensive teenager with crossed arms, but a young woman with growing poise. Last year, I stood on a stage and said something cruel and untrue. I said that Diane was just our stepmom, and that we only listened to our real mom. She took a deep breath. Today, I want to say something different, something true. Family isn't defined by blood or by titles like step or real. Family is defined by who shows up for you every day, who loves you even when you're unlovable, who believes in you even when you don't believe in yourself. Cameron joined her. A year ago, I thought respect was optional, something you could give or withhold based on how you felt that day. I've learned that real respect isn't a feeling. It's a choice you make, especially when it's difficult. Sophie stepped forward next, her voice small but determined. Our family broke last year, but then we fixed it, and now it's stronger. Like my science teacher says, sometimes things have to fall apart so you can put them back together better. Lucas, never one to miss his moment in the spotlight, grabbed the microphone last. And we learned that when people say mean things, you don't have to say mean things back. You can just change the Wi-Fi password. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause as Greg gently retrieved the microphone. On behalf of the Block Party Committee, we officially declare this year's celebration open. Please enjoy the food, music, and most importantly, each other's company. Because that's what community is all about. Showing up for each other even after the hard times. Especially after the hard times. As we stepped off the platform, people approached with handshakes, hugs, and words of appreciation. Some shared their own blended family challenges. Others simply thanked us for our honesty. That was beautiful, said Mrs. Peterson, Madison's dance instructor. And brave. It was just the truth, Madison replied with a small shrug. Finally. Later, as twilight deepened and the band played a soft country ballad, I found myself standing at the edge of the square, watching our family scattered across the celebration, Lucas playing cornhole with neighborhood kids, Sophie showing her latest art project to an admiring audience, Madison and Cameron dancing goofily to the music with their friends. Greg appeared at my side, offering a plastic cup of lemonade. "Penny for your thoughts?" "Just marveling at how far we've come," I said, accepting the drink. "A year ago tonight, I was calling the mayor to witness me changing the locks on our house." Greg winced slightly at the memory. "Not my finest hour as a husband or father, but maybe a necessary one," I suggested. "Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we can start climbing back up." He nodded thoughtfully. "You know what I remember most about that night? Not the kids' words, not the shock on everyone's faces. What I remember is watching you walk away with such dignity. You didn't scream or cry or make a scene. You just decided your worth wasn't up for debate. I didn't feel very dignified at the time, I admitted. I felt humiliated, angry, heartbroken. But you channeled those feelings into action instead of reaction," he said. "You taught all of us something important that night." Before I could respond, Mayor Jackson approached, his perpetual American flag pin gleaming in the string lights. "Quite a different scene from last year," he observed, nodding toward the celebration spread before us. "Indeed," I agreed. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "in my 30 years as mayor, I've seen plenty of family dramas play out in this town, but I've rarely seen one resolve with such grace." He gestured toward where Cameron was now giving Lucas a piggyback ride through the crowd, both of them laughing. "That right there, that's what matters. Not that you never faced challenges, but how you rose to meet them." After the mayor moved on to greet other constituents, Greg slipped his arm around my waist. "Dance with me?" "Here?" I asked, surprised. "We're not exactly dressed for dancing." He shrugged. "Doesn't matter. I just want to hold my wife under the stars in the same spot where our story nearly ended, and celebrate that it didn't." As we swayed gently to the music, I caught sight of our children watching us from across the square, all 4 of them standing together, smiling. "They look happy," I murmured. "They are happy," Greg replied. "We all are." Later that night, after the party had wound down and we'd returned home with tired feet and full hearts, I found Madison sitting alone on the porch swing, scrolling through photos on her phone. "May I join you?" I asked. She scooted over, making room. "Look at these," she said, holding out her phone. "I've been comparing tonight's pictures with ones from a year ago." I scrolled through the images. Last year's stiff, forced smiles contrasted with tonight's genuine joy. The physical changes were evident. Cameron taller, Sophie with a new haircut, Lucas missing his front teeth, but the emotional transformation was even more striking. "What a difference," I murmured. Madison nodded. "I was just thinking about how different I feel too. Last year I was so angry all the time. I blamed you for everything. For Dad not being with Mom, for having to move, for having to share my space." "That's understandable," I said. "You were dealing with a lot of changes you didn't ask for." "Maybe," she conceded, "but I was also being a total brat." I laughed at her bluntness. "Well, I won't argue with that assessment." She grinned, then grew serious again. "Diane, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "That night, when Cameron and I said those awful things, why didn't you yell at us? Why didn't you make a big scene?" I considered her question carefully. Because in that moment, I realized something important. My dignity wasn't determined by how others treated me, but by how I responded to that treatment. "So you just walked away and called the mayor? And changed the locks and disconnected the Wi-Fi?" I reminded her, with a smile. "It wasn't exactly passive," she laughed. No, it definitely wasn't. It was actually kind of badass. Language, I said automatically, but without heat. Sorry, it was actually kind of empowering, she amended. And it worked. It made us all wake up. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the porch swing creaking gently beneath us. I'm really glad you didn't give up on us, Madison said finally, her voice small, even though we gave you every reason to. I put my arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. The best things in life are often the ones we have to fight the hardest for. Like family, she said. Exactly like family. As summer deepened into another Georgia August, life in our house on Maple Street settled into sweet rhythms. Morning rushes to summer, activities, afternoon popsicles on the porch, evening walks as fireflies began to twinkle in the gathering dusk. The anniversary of the block party had come and gone, transformed from a painful memory into a milestone of growth, a before and after marker in our family's journey. One evening, as Greg and I sat on the back deck watching the sunset while the children played an elaborate game of tag, across the yard, he turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What is it?" I asked. "I was just thinking about the night you left, when you changed the locks and sent me that text saying I was on my own with the kids." I waited, curious where this was going. "I was so angry at first," he continued. "I couldn't believe you'd walk away, that you'd be so dramatic about what happened." "I remember," I said dryly. "You made that quite clear in your 17 missed calls and 32 text messages." He laughed, shaking his head. "God, I was clueless. It took me 3 days of solo parenting to realize I had no idea what I was doing, and that you'd been doing it all along, without recognition or support." "Better late than never," I offered. "What I'm trying to say is thank you," he said, taking my hand. "Thank you for loving our family enough to break it open so we could heal properly. Thank you for showing our children what self-respect looks like. Thank you for giving us all a second chance we probably didn't deserve." From the yard came squeals of laughter as Lucas finally tagged Cameron, who immediately began chasing Madison while Sophie darted behind a tree. "Look at them," Greg said softly. "All 4 of them, playing together like they've been siblings their whole lives." "They're still figuring it out," I reminded him. "We all are, but we're figuring it out together," he said. "And that makes all the difference." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in stripes of pink and gold, I thought about the journey we'd taken, from that humiliating moment on stage to this peaceful evening at home. The path hadn't been straight or easy. There had been tears and setbacks, difficult conversations and painful truths, but we had persevered. We had rebuilt. Not the family I had initially envisioned, perhaps, but something stronger. A family tested by fire and forged in honest communication. A family that had come full circle. "Mom! Dad! Come play with us!" Lucas called from the yard. Greg stood, pulling me to my feet. "Shall we?" Hand in hand, we joined our children in the gathering twilight, running, laughing, belonging. Not perfect, but perfectly ours. The strongest love, I had learned, isn't the one that never faces challenges. It's the one that knows its own worth, that establishes clear boundaries, that demands respect not through force but through quiet dignity. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is walk away, and sometimes the most beautiful thing we can do is come back together, stronger, wiser, and more grateful for the journey that brought us home.